All right, let's get started. So today, this is actually our last conversation with scientists. Um, so hopefully you're all bringing your kind of energy for the close of the session. We have two friends of the Yale Ciencia Academy, two relatively young scientists who have participated in previous conversations with the program, I think both for the first cohort. We have Dr. Samuel Díaz-Muñoz, who's an assistant professor at UC Davis. And we have Dr. Verónica, oops, sorry, I just lost something here.
Segarra.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was getting confused. Oh, there's a little bit of background, sorry. Okay. Sorry, we have Dr. Verónica Segarra, who's a professor at High Point University. I'm going to let both of them give a little bit of an introduction so that you can know them better, what they're working on, but also what their background and context is. We had a third panelist, Dr. Michelle Martinez Montemayor at UC Central del Caribe. But unfortunately, she's been traveling and she had delays due to the situation in Puerto Rico, so she wasn't able to join us, but she sends her regrets. But let's start with Vero. Can you introduce yourself and tell the students?
Hello, Yale Ciencia fellows. My name is Verónica Segarra, and I'm an assistant professor of biology at High Point University in North Carolina. High Point is part of the Piedmont Triad in North Carolina, and so we're very close to Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and then we're about an hour and a half or so from Durham. So that kind of gives you an idea of where I am. And High Point University is a primarily undergraduate institution. So there at HPU or High Point University, I teach, I have a small lab, and undergraduate students help me drive my research forward. My research relates to membrane trafficking during periods of cellular stress, namely autophagy or autophagy, however you prefer to pronounce it. And my model system is bunny yeast.
Great. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself to the students?
Sure. Hi, Yale Ciencia Academy fellows. My name is Samuel Díaz-Muñoz, as Giovanna already said. I'm an assistant professor at UC Davis, University of California, Davis. UC Davis is, if you don't know, it's about an hour away from Sacramento, hour and a half from the San Francisco Bay Area. It is in some ways a large research university, but also with a lot of undergraduates. A lot of emphasis on teaching over here too, but the research is very important as well. And actually we're close to becoming, or I think maybe officially have become, a Hispanic serving institution, so that's very exciting. I just started my lab in July of this year, and I study viral evolution. I study what I like to call the social lives of viruses, which is basically what happens when more than one virus infects a host or a cell, especially with regard to viral replication, to genetic exchange, and to different adaptive changes in the viral genome. And originally I'm from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican parents, born abroad, and I traveled in the States for a little bit while my father was in the military. And then I did the rest of my schooling in Puerto Rico through high school, and graduated UPR Maya West for my bachelor's. And yeah, so proud colegial here.
Great, wonderful. So today we wanted to talk about a big topic, work-life balance. I think it's something that we are constantly thinking about how to do better. But I think it's important to start with kind of baseline so that we're all on the same page. And this is actually something that the students suggested starting with. And it's, let's start with definitions. For you, for each of you, how do you define work-life balance? What does that mean specifically to you? So let's start with Verónica.
Sure. So for me, work-life balance is being able to get to a state where I am enjoying relatively equally, for the most part, both my professional and personal activities. That's how I would define work-life balance. When done right, you're able to derive happiness and satisfaction from both your professional and personal activities. I'll leave it at that. I'll let Sam take over.
Wow, that was a really good definition. I guess the way I was thinking about it was, for me, work-life balance came into my life when I had children, when my wife had children, and I guess for me, it used to be in grad school that I had, basically one priority. And it feels now that I have two big priorities. So one is what happens, at home, and one is what with my children, especially my wife, and the other one is what happens at school. So it's about having those two priorities and not feeling like you're failing at both, although you usually do feel like you are. But I guess it's in some ways it's no different than having competing priorities at work. It's about making it work.
All right. So, so Sam, you gave a little bit of a context of what integrating work and life is like on a daily basis for you. Actually, for both of you, can you give a little bit more detail about what that looks like on a daily basis? So Sam, maybe for you, what is specifically, how do you balance the priorities of your research and your job as an assistant faculty member at UC Davis with your two big priorities of your wife and your daughter on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like?
Sorry, I have sirens in the background and helicopters. So, but this will be a good explanation for work-life balance. So right now, I am, as you can see behind me, there's a mural. That's because I'm at my daughter's school. This meeting on my time goes until 5:30, and we should be picking up our kids around that time. So basically, I just decided to come here and do the talk here because we have communications that we can do outside, and so I can just sit here on a bench and do the call and then immediately go and pick up my daughter. So I guess it's that type of thing of making it work day to day. I think I guess the best way to put it is, it's really become really integrated into my planning, so that I have tasks to do every day. And I plan those. So today I had this call, and I'm very happy to have it. So I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this without letting all the other balls drop? And so day to day, it's a question about figuring it out with your partner, which my wife is a great partner, and just making it work. I guess more generally for me, I tend to work during the week and just make that my focus of my working hours, and then my weekend is generally for my family. So that's one way of just partitioning it very, very nicely, so that I ensure that I'm spending enough time with my family and advancing things at the home. And
what does your wife do?
My wife is also an academic. She's also a young PI. And we are fortunate to be in the same institution, which greatly facilitates work-life balance. But yeah, it's challenging because she has the same sort of set of the same busy agenda as I do. but fortunately, one thing about this job is that it can be flexible. So we try to fit it all in, so that we're succeeding at work and also enjoying life with each other.
Great, thank you. Carl, I see you, but let me go first to Veronica and ask her the same question. Vero, what is a day-to-day work and life context for you, and how do you integrate them daily?
So for me, daily work-life integration or balance is focused on time. So as someone who strives to derive joy and satisfaction from both work and personal life, I need time to derive that pleasure and derive that happiness and satisfaction. So daily, I try to really keep a steady schedule. And so I think many of us can relate to this idea of loving what we do to some extent. And so it's really easy to work very long hours. And I am very intentional about not doing that. I want to leave in the afternoon work. I want to leave wanting to come back first thing in the morning. And to do that, I try to I have to be excited about my personal life, to be able to peel myself away from the lab, from the classroom, from my students. And I think that would be one of how I would describe my strategy towards to achieve daily work-life integration or balance. This idea of time, trying to keep a steady schedule, and make sure that you're not spending too much time in one area. Instead, you're so excited about either your personal or your professional life that you can't wait for that time of the day to arrive. And in terms of work, that could be excitement about training students at the bench or teaching a particular course. In terms of personal life, it would be, of course, maybe hanging out with family, or maybe a hobby that you have, or if you really enjoy working out or hiking, that would be something that you would be excited about and would be you would be able to use that interest to peel yourself away from work. So I think that would be how I would describe my strategy overall.
Okay, great. Well, let's open it up to questions. So Carl, do you want to go ahead?
Hi guys. Well, my question is, at what point in your graduate school career did you realize work-life balance was essential?
Whoever wants to take it first, go ahead.
For me, I think I never figured it out. I think so I really like what Veronica said about time. It really is about time, and I felt in grad school, my experience, I was not married, I didn't have kids, I didn't have any other external responsibilities. So I was very free to use my time however I wanted. Now I realize just how much time I had then, but I always did manage to balance my own activities with work. But I think it was more unplanned. So it was more like I would just burn out, and I just couldn't think anymore, and I couldn't do things. So then it was like, I should just go for a bike ride or something. Or now might be a good time to take a couple of days off. So it was less planned, less structured. But I did find that I had the time to do it, and I realized quickly that there was a lot of flexibility. At least my program had a lot of flexibility because there was a lot of the focus was on the research, so we didn't have a lot of coursework. So it was a question of planning the time. There were like extremely busy times when I was doing lab work or field work or grant writing. Yes, I did grant write while I was in grad school as well. So I think I realized that there was flexibility in the job, and I could have these crunch times, but then it was okay if I took a few days off.
What about you, Vero? Did you
So,
realize?
yeah. I'm trying to think back, and as a graduate student, I don't think there was a time where I thought to myself, I need more work-life balance in my life. You know what I mean? I was just trying to train as a scientist the best that I could, kind of like squeeze the juice out of the resources that were available to me. Looking back, thinking back, I do realize that there were times in my graduate career where I was the happiest. And those were the times where I was less stressed in general. And those were the times that I made time to, go out to dinner with friends or go to the theater. I did my graduate degree at Yale in New Haven, Connecticut, and I lived very close to the lab and very close to downtown. So I could very easily walk after a full day's work. I could walk to downtown, go to the Yale Rep, the theater, on the way there, stop by for dinner. And those were my happiest times. When I was doing other things than just research. Not that I didn't enjoy research, but this idea that there are other things to do. And my least happy times were when I was essentially burnt out. Like I would drive myself to work so hard because yes, I liked it, but I wasn't aliquoting my time properly. And so these are things that I'm able to realize now that I'm a little older. And so that is part of the reason why I have that philosophy of really controlling the amount of time I spend at work and personal. And when I say really controlling, is not like, oh, only 5 hours here, 8 hours here. No, there's, there's some flexibility, but in general, you want to keep a steady schedule to make sure that you're feeding the different sides of your life, personal and professional.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be interested in also hearing from the students if there's anybody that has actually come to that realization. I think Sam and Veronica have hinted, sometimes if, particularly in grad school, you're so excited about the research you're doing and you're so people are self-motivated to get things done. Sometimes you don't realize it until it's a little bit too late, and you start burning out.
And sorry.
No, go ahead, Vero.
I have to say that, as a PI now, it's easier to control your own time, right? So that's something that I didn't have as a graduate student, but looking back, I could have worked smarter to make sure that in a 8-hour, 9-hour day, I could have finished everything I wanted to finish so I could go home early, say, be at home by 6 so that I could get a full night's sleep and make myself dinner. You know what I mean? But now I think that's something to look forward, you guys that are, in graduate school and maybe postdoc. As you progress in your academic training and your professional training, it'll come a time where I think you will be in a better position to achieve work-life balance, partly because you might not be working under someone necessarily. You might be your own boss, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I really agree with what Veronica said about time and aliquoting time. That theme has kept on coming up, and about being more efficient. During those grad school years, I was probably pretty happy because I managed to do stuff, but I probably could have. I know now that I could have done it way more efficiently. So I think I framed a lot of my work-life balance around having children, but it's just because it forces you to do that. So I think the risk for people who don't have children or other family responsibilities, it's really having systems in place to structure that and thinking about those happiest times in grad school. It was when I was pursuing my hobbies, and so in grad school, I was part of the UC Berkeley cycling team. So that provided some sort of distraction and structure. So I had, a training regimen to do. and that really provided some structure. And I was quite happy during those times, actually. So that's a great point that Veronica made. So yeah, if you don't have children's, if you don't have family responsibilities or work outside of grad school, find ways to structure your time so you're happy, and that'll make you more productive too when you go back to it.
I think something else is what I know about work-life balance, I've learned for the most part through trial and error. I think it's great that you guys are having these intentional conversations around these topics. So I would encourage you to be observant of the people around you. Notice people that are particularly efficient at, doing research or doing what it is that you guys do at the bench, whether that be biomedical sciences or psychology or some other area. Notice how they work. You can even perhaps ask for their advice if you're trying to be intentional about being efficient with your time and how you distribute the time that you spend at work. I'm sure that they would love if you were to ask them, I've noticed that you're super efficient at the bench. Would you mind, giving me some tips or, advice? And so that's, I think, one of the best things that you can do. Be observant about the people around you, and notice behaviors that you might want to copy because they really lead to productivity, happiness, just overall good energy around someone.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think role models, as with everything, can be very important to help us think about how to structure our careers and what type of scientists we can be. Are there any particular role models that Sam and Veronica that have been important for figuring out this work-life balance issue for you guys that you would want to share?
I would say that some of the, again, a lot of this I have figured out like by trial and error. So these are pieces of advice I'm kind of like giving you guys, but I wish I would have, known to apply them back when I was a grad student. That's when I transitioned from a postdoc to being in a primarily undergraduate institution, so a primarily teaching institution, that was a big shift that I experienced. And so I was having a hard time figuring out a good balance between research, between teaching new courses, making sure that I made myself accessible to students, and things like sleep. And so my colleagues, one of the reasons why I decided to transition into the primarily undergraduate institution was because I like teaching in the context of a small environment. And how I decided to do that was that I became a visiting professor at a small college in Florida, near Orlando. And so that was a 1-year position, and those colleagues were super instrumental in my developing healthy habits around, an intense day teaching. And so, one of the best pieces of advice I received from one of my colleagues there, and this was at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, was, when you're trying to generate material for new courses, right? You're teaching new courses to undergraduates, you're going to feel the need to maybe compromise sleep so that you can prep for every potential question or every potential scenario that can come up in the classroom. And that might, the advice I received is that that's actually not a good idea, because when you're sleep deprived, you can't improvise less, you're less energetic, and those are things that you need in the classroom. So it's okay to compromise on prep a little bit so that you can get a full night's sleep. And so I remember that piece of advice, I took it with an open heart, and it worked. And I was just so thankful. And just like that, there were, little things here and there that my colleagues at Rollins really helped me adjust. And so after my year there, I transitioned into the position that I am in today. And so it felt a lot easier because I had experienced that 1 year with really awesome advice around me.
Sam, is there any advice that you were given or any role models that you took strategies from that you would like to share? I think it helps, you know, when we speak about concrete things so that people can make it more actionable.
Yeah, the one thing that came to mind to me was a lab mate that I had, who was, she seemed like she worked really efficiently. Like she would go in and she kept pretty regular hours. They weren't short, they weren't long, but you know, she was in and out, and she didn't chit chat much, and she was very focused, and she would put on these huge headphones. She was very successful. She got her own grant funding, funded her project. She's now a tenured professor. So it always seemed to be very no drama, which is very different from most graduate students, like that are, you know, like me. Like I was super frazzled, super freaking out when I was taking my qualifying exams, for example. And I never saw her that worked up. And I think it was because she had really, really good focus. So when she went to school, she was working. And so, yeah, I think I'm closer to that, but I don't think I've achieved that yet. But that's one thing that really popped into my mind.
All right, so I think I muted a couple of people because the sound quality wasn't good, but I don't know if maybe you guys were trying to ask a question. So Diana, I noticed your phone was on, and Gladys. So if you want to ask a question, please unmute yourselves, or anybody. Or raise your hand. One of the things that was in the list of questions the students shared that I think it's an interesting topic is there such a thing as a workaholic, and should students be worried if they are spending, you know, 10 hours a day in lab? When should they start worrying about that?
Well, I think when you're a graduate student, you should be focused on what do I need to do to work hard every day in a sustainable way. So I think if you're working hard, like say for most of the week, and then you notice that you're really running out of steam in a particular period, like towards the end of the week or towards the end of the month, that might be a sign, I think, an indication that you might be working a little bit too much in the context of not giving your brain and your body enough time to recover from a full day's work. So I would say try to find a way to work hard every day in a sustainable way. So that you want to leave lab or whatever your research environment is wanting to come back the next day. That's what I would say for that.
Sam, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have actually a good story about this. I was in a faculty mentoring program recently, and so we were talking about this, about work-life balance and you know, taking time off, and I think I can do this without breaking confidentiality, but this person basically said that they would feel better. So their challenge was to stop working on the weekends because they work through the weekends. And so the person knew that it was beneficial to step away from work, that it's good to take a break, that you're more productive, that you're more refreshed, and all these things. But the person couldn't bring themselves to do that. And so as they were talking about it, they said, well, the way I see it is I work during the weekend, and then that makes me feel better. So then I have a more balanced life. So basically, I think that's a very workaholic comment. When you're basically rationalizing your your desire to work as justifying, as bringing balance into your life. And I think I'm not an expert in this, but I think there is actually, genuine scientific research about the benefits of stepping away from work and doing something else for a while in terms of creativity and productivity.
Yeah, and I think definitely what Veronica said in terms of losing sleep, in terms of sustaining a good level of energy, making sure that when you're waking up in the mornings, you're excited about going into lab to work. Those are good indicators that you're maybe, whatever your balance is, it's not tipping on the workaholic scale. So any questions from the students? Oh, I see Bianca. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hi. Yeah, so I have a bit of a lofty question that we can just like discuss as a group or not, however you want to answer this. So I'm curious about what advice that both of you have to offer for us as a community, both men and women, to stop engendering these cultural norms that exist, in particular for women scientists, when we go in either to industry or academia, and we're already prejudged with these notions of when we're younger, if we don't have children, sometimes it's in the back of, I know male PIs' heads, like, well, are they going to have children? Are they going to take time off? Will they be appropriate for this postdoc? And then kind of striking that work-life balance, right? Because, to some degree, I think a lot of working professionals either want to choose to have a family or have something that creates a work-life balance such that they're able to have the life they want to live. So how can we as a community, I guess, work to end those types of prejudgments or support each other in different ways to help that arena?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thanks.
Yeah. So gender structures in society and how they affect, our academic lives and expectations from others.
So I think the way I would frame that question is that is one of the biggest challenges facing academia and the scientific workforce and the workforce at large. And it's how do we make sure that we have a side conversation on the chat about daycare and how much daycare costs relative to rent. It's higher in many cities. So I think a good way to frame it is that represents it's definitely a gender issue, but it's also a problem in terms of the productivity, the talent we get. We lose people who prioritize family life, saying something about our values as a society. So I think it's really important for us to work towards that. I think framing it from both sides, making all the arguments, the economic argument, which I think is really powerful and hasn't been talked about as much. I think the way it's being talked about now is if you look at the most valuable companies in the world right now and the ones that are attracting the top talent, which are places like Facebook and Google, and our work is not far removed from that. They are supporting childcare in a really big way. So I think we need to take a cue from that and make that economic argument even more forcefully. I think we have to make a statement that we are for gender equality. I think a lot of that responsibility falls on us PIs and speaking up at hiring processes, hiring meetings, promotion meetings, and all this stuff. So there's stuff we can do at conferences, at our gatherings as departments. So, for example, happy hour is usually a terrible time to have stuff if you want to support families. I say anything after 5 p.m. I have to be over here picking up my children, and that's the case for many many parents. So I think it does seem like a huge problem, and it is. But I think there's small things we can do that will hopefully build up culture, and I think you were hinting at that in your question. So I think that's one thing, and then there are sort of larger things that we need to like really attack and use sort of our power and influence within institutions, and also use the law when we have to, because a lot of these things are illegal and they're hard to police, and if we don't police them themselves, and what I mean by a lot of these things are illegal are like making a hiring decision based on any protected categories, and in particular if a woman is pregnant or asking about the status or anything like that is illegal. It's a workplace discrimination. So I don't know if that provides like at least a broad outline, but yeah, it's a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think I would add thinking about being intentional about supporting your colleagues or classmates that have children or are striving to fight for their rights or their resources. And that can be at a very personal level, and that's okay. Or you can choose to join larger advocacy efforts, and that's great. So I think the important thing is at the level that you decide to get involved, you want that effort to be genuine and to be meaningful to you and to others around you.
Yeah. One piece of advice that I got for those who are still, not partnered, if you're interested in a career in research or in general in a career, you should really look for a partner that supports those career interests and those aspects. Mm-hmm. That's essential. It's something that is ingrained in our society, these gendered roles, but on an individual level, if you're a woman and you don't want to fall prey to that, that's one way you can start, is by choosing a partner that's supportive in that respect. And I agree with Sam and Veronica. It's an issue that's a problem in general, and it's a problem in academia, and it's been recognized in many different forums and in many different settings. And although we like to think that we're scientists and we're unbiased and we're, driven by evidence, we're humans and we fall prey to these societal norms and structures. So it's important to be aware of that, and as you continue to go through the academia and different work settings, if you can be an advocate for culture change, I think we'll be better off in general. I see a lot of, I don't know if anybody wants to add to any of that discussion. I know it's a very, deep subject. So feel free to speak up.
I would like to add something. It's Francesca. I think one of the things that we definitely need to be conscious about is that it's not only male PIs, is women also do that too. For example, I got married a year and some months ago, and the first comment I got from a lot of my coworkers, which are all women, was like, don't get pregnant yet, like you're young, you're whatever. And I was really taken aback, one, because I didn't expect that from women coworkers, and two, because I don't think that's a decision. I think those are comments that are not positive, and although they weren't negative. So I think at the same time, we sometimes, all of us, and I include myself because I might have done it and never realized it, to think before we speak, and to make sure that we're not inputting our own thoughts and fears into somebody else's life. And that's just my 2 cents.
I'd like to add to your comment. I think that I can relate to your comment, and a thought that came to me is the following. Sometimes when we get these questions that are a bit odd, okay, one of the things that I like to do is jot them down and think to myself, if I were to be asked this question again, how would I answer? To use this as a teaching moment, as again, kind of like a way to fight the fight, so to speak, you know? So maybe that's an idea. Whenever you get a weird question like that or an odd question, think to yourself, if I was asked this again, how would I respond so that I can potentially use this, at least make clear where I stand, or use it as a teaching moment for that other person?
I'm muted. Yeah, there we go. So I would say that maybe the comments might have been well intentioned, but I think they were definitely negative, and think they contribute to the issue. I think a good way to counter that is to talk to, well, first. There was actually another side conversation going on in chat about how to identify good institutions. That might be a sign that institution isn't particularly supportive. So you might want to look into that and talk to more people and have more questions about that that you can ask about people. Not during an interview necessarily, but after you've secured a position. And the other thought I had was that, that you need to, or that it's more helpful to talk to people who have children and who've actually been through it, and people that you feel that are in a position that you want to be in the future, and that have already done it, and that you admire. And that could be an advisor, that could be a mentor, it could just be a colleague. But finding those people and getting that support and that real, and they will tell you, for like, if a young scholar comes to me and asks me about I will tell them like the whole truth. So finding supportive people and role models, like Joanna said, is going to be key to counteracting some negative comments that you get.
That was a great transition, Sam, to this question about how to not just, we pick our partners, but we also pick where we choose to work. In both of your cases, you're relatively new to your faculty positions. Was work-life balance or the culture of the institution towards having balanced lives for faculty members a decision in where you chose to work, or was it also a consideration previously for your postdocs, for where you chose to do your postdocs, which lab?
In my case, I tend to be very driven, and so I know that I determine my happiness, my satisfaction levels with professional and personal life. So I really chose my postdoc based on the science. And yes, I did want to have a good mentor, so I thought about that too, scientific mentor. In terms of the institution that I am in now, one of the key things was that when I came interview to High Point, I noticed people were happy here. And so I didn't ask them about the work-life balance, but I did notice that, sometimes their hobbies would come up in conversations, or their families, and so that was a good indication. So I'm not sure that I would specifically ask about people's work-life balance during an interview, but that's something that I think you can see through when you're interacting with people, especially in settings where you might be sharing a meal or a coffee.
So my experience was in the transition from my postdoc. My wife was already a faculty member, and so in terms of moving to Davis, the first wave sort of family friendliness and culture came into it was really just the cost of living. We were based in New York City before, and you know, depending on how much you like cities and how well off you are in New York City, it can be a great place to raise kids, or maybe a terrible place to raise kids if you don't like it, if you don't like cities. But cost of living just makes it so that it is very, very challenging to do. So that already was sort of one thing that motivated. There were other professional reasons, of course, but just having the cost of living be more manageable was really important already in making that decision. And I would say in terms of family friendliness, and that also has to do with, you know, how good public schools are and whatnot. So I think now that I'm here, I realize how important it is to have the university explicitly support family-friendly policies and well, I should say have friendly family policies and enforce them, and have a culture that encourages that. I've seen here that basically if that culture is from the top down, it can really make a difference, because departments might be sort of variably supportive of certain things. But when you know, I mean, universities are, for better or for worse, hierarchical organizations. So, you know, when you can go straight to the top and get what you need, that makes a huge difference. Even if you're in a department that's not supportive. Although I would say that basically having a family-friendly culture university-wide from the top really engenders departments and all the units below to be family friendly. So yeah, I think actually this is one case where you can get a lot of insight looking over web pages and policies, and then combining that with talking to people there can really help. So yeah, I think it was a factor for us, sort of at the cost of living level. But after I got here, I realized how important it is, and I think that's really, really important. Is the university level and how much administration supports it.
Yeah, I think policies are probably a good bellwether for general culture. So if the university has progressive policies towards families, then you can expect that probably your colleagues will be more, will be utilizing those policies. Your department will be more open. And even if you don't have kids, you still are in an environment that appreciates people having a life outside of their professional life. So it's a good, it's good for everybody. Okay, and I see Antonieta has a raised hand, but Marcos had asked to ask a question on the chat. So we'll go to Marcos and then we'll go to Antonieta. Go ahead, Marcos.
Hi, everyone. So my question is basically, I have read also about some kind of different opinions in this of the work and life balance. I read sometime a quote that was like, it's not the same making a living that making a life. And I also heard once that once you start doing what you love to do or what you decide to do with your life for the rest of it, it becomes who you are. And then I don't see, so I can see both positions and kind of understand both positions, but I don't know how or let's see, what's your opinion about which of these statements will be more correct or more assertive, let's say?
I mean, I think it's just really individual. I think you I think one of those might resonate more with you than the other, or maybe you're right in the middle. I know. I think academia tends to be a place where we really, value our work and really identify as our work, and in some ways we become our work and derive a lot of self-worth from that. So I think that's why we get a lot of workaholism and stuff like that. But I think you can have a position that's closer to that, and still have work-life balance. So I don't think it's if you derive a lot of pleasure from your work, and you make your work sort of part of your life and your being. I don't think that necessarily means that you have to have no life other than work. I think it just means that that's an aspect of it that you really, really value. So I think either one works, and it's a really, I think that's true in general for the whole work-life balance issue. The balance, if you want to use that metaphor, is going to be at different places for different people, and that's totally fine. I think the only time you can actually question that is if, is this person, either A, failing at their job, which means they're not doing, having good balance, or they're failing at their, health and well-being. I mean, I think those are extremes, but other than that, I think you basically just, you decide. It's very individual.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Giovanna.
No, I was going to ask if you had anything to add.
Oh, so I agree. I think that being a professional is hard, right? And so I think if you think that what you do for a living just provides you with a means to live, right? With a salary that will allow you to buy food, put a roof over your head, I don't think you're going to have a particularly easy time persevering through challenges and meeting those challenges with success. It might be a little harder if you're just focused on making a living. So I like this idea of you're making a life. And so you are, through your work, you're making a contribution to society. What is that contribution? What are those values that your contributions speak to? And I think that's something very personal. But when your work feeds into your personal mission, who you are as an individual, I think that's when it's a little bit easier to drive yourself to success, and through even if that means going through challenges. So I those are my thoughts on that. That's very deep.
It's a beautiful quote. Antonietta, let's go over to you. Do you still have your question?
Hi, yeah, I do. Sorry you can't see me. I don't know what happened with my camera. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up a point that Sam kind of touched on a little bit about like when it comes from the top, and like how the lab culture and like the department culture is. And in general, I've heard that there's like a lot of things that the PIs have control over. So like hands-on versus hands-off. And I'm very lucky that my PI is great with that. As long as we get our work done, he doesn't micromanage our hours. But then I have some friends who really struggle. And I know it's late now because they're like third-year students. So they already joined the lab. There's no like weighing their options again. But their PIs basically expect them to be there like every weekend. And I know like some people will do that and will be happy, but some others feel like they shouldn't be pressured to do that. So like from the PI's perspective, and you guys were also students at some point, what do you think that they can do without coming off as like being lazy or like not committed?
Go ahead.
So I think, I guess the way I see it, and I'm just starting as a new PI, so I can't say I have a lot of experience with this. With my own advisor, it was very hands off. So we had a lot of liberty in our projects, and with that liberty came a lot of responsibility to do stuff. So I think the extreme of hands off can also be bad, particularly for students, if you don't have guidance. That said, my PhD advisor was great in that she was hands off, but hands off, open door, if that makes sense. So basically, that allowed you to come to her at any point that you needed. So you really, as long as you had initiative, you really had a lot of input in deciding, how much aid you got and how much handholding you got, if you needed that. So I can tell you what I'm going to try out in my lab, and I think what's important is that work gets done. So basically, what I'm going to try to do is make it like really goal oriented and see, okay, this is what we want to do. And sort of set deadlines, but also make that a conversation about how things can be met, how much time, the trainees think it'll take, and then sort of touch base regularly on that, and then have hours be, whatever you need to make it work, basically, because I think in that, like for me, it's not useful if my postdocs are there, 7 days a week, if they're not producing anything. And it doesn't help their careers either. So for me, I think what I'm going to try to do is be very, talk about milestones, talk about goals, and touch base on those and figure out, okay, if it's not happening, why is that? What can we do? And likewise seeing, like, if we're way ahead of schedule and things are really working, and I notice a lot of work in the lab, try to guard against burnout, and stuff like that. So I think one of the things that I value about this work is the flexibility. So I think people have different schedules, and I think that's one of the great parts of the job. So as long as we're working towards a common goal, I think that's all we need. But check in with me in a few years to see how that plan worked.
I think in the scenario that you described, one has to think about communication between PI and student, right? I think the expectations have to be clear. Ideally, this is something that is defined early on. When you're about to join a lab, that way you can use this as one of the criteria to choose a lab. But sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes expectations change, right? And so that's okay. So then I would say that if you're a student having difficulties with the managing style of your PI, you need to take a step back and try to figure out what the expectations are. And many times the best way to figure this out is to ask the PI, what are the expectations? And so that can be defined in many terms, like amount of hours or productivity. Oftentimes PIs tend to think in productivity, like Sam described. And so it might be a function then of a student figuring out, well, I need to figure out a way to do this set of experiments during this week. And so that's when talking to more experienced people around you can help. People that have done those types of experiments before, of have worked in the lab. Even asking the PI, it's like, well, I don't really know whether I'm going to be able to do this. All these things this week. Could you help me out? How could I scaffold these things to be able to meet your expectations? And so the first step is to to know your expectations. Otherwise, you don't really have an idea of what to work towards, and probably you will miss the mark partly because you don't know where the mark is or what it is.
Yeah, these are all very good questions, and they're difficult questions. I mean, we're in an ideal setting. You know, you would have principal investigators that would not demand that students work 80 hours a week, or so yeah, unfortunately these things happen. Hopefully, you know, as you're aware, as you're making the transition to the next laboratory, you can take what you've learned and have those conversations up front, like Veronica says. Really gauge what the expectations are, and like somebody is pointing out in the chat, if that doesn't jive with what your personal style or, you know, personal ratio of work to life is, then you can use that to make a decision. There were a couple of comments a while ago in the chat. Anjali and Nicole were talking about what to do when you're already kind of in the midst of a situation where you're becoming overwhelmed by work. You know, you have, you know, you're giving classes as a TA, you're taking courses, plus you have research. Anjali and Nicole, feel free to jump in if you want to give more details about these situations.
I could talk a little bit about that. I mean, Anjali was the one who brought it up initially, so feel free to also jump in. But in this scenario, so I'm a second-year student, so I have to finish my coursework by the end of this year, and some of the courses I had to change departments because of the PI that I decided to have as my advisor, and I have to do all of these things by next summer. So right now I'm trying to juggle being a TA and taking a biophysics course as well as a seminar course, and I'm trying to set up thesis committee meetings because one of the members of my committee is going to be gone next semester. And yeah, it's very difficult to try to maintain a balance, and the schedules don't help at all. So I have one class on Tuesdays and Thursdays that's like at 9 a.m. and the other one is from 5 to 8 p.m. So it's 11-hour days, and I don't really have control over it. And I realize that it's temporary and that I'm beyond the halfway mark, but it's been really tough. So if you have any advice, feel free.
I think it is tough. I think I look back, you know, everything I said about, you know, having kids and how hard that is. I think back to, you know, my last year of undergrad and you know, doing coursework, applying to grad schools, doing GREs and doing all that stuff. So the workload can really increase really rapidly, and schedules don't always help. I one thing that I would say, I mean, for now, like for the immediate now where your schedule is already set, I think, you know, prioritize your well-being, because if not, just things will unravel. So just try to, within that, if you can schedule stuff, you know, like if you can't, you should be able to sleep 8 hours. But if not, you know, schedule naps, try to exercise and, you know, eat healthy. But in the future, I think you probably have more power over your schedule than you think. So I think now maybe this is a good mark for this is too much. And so in the future, you'll know that you can take that class, and if that means that I have to spend an extra year in grad school, then so be it, because it'll be so much better. So I think you have a lot of you don't set everything, but you probably have more control than you think, and you know, basically just try to use that power. And if you run into a little bit of resistance, just talk to other people and see how you can figure it out so you don't irritate people. But my guess is that a lot of stuff people won't even notice if you don't take this class this semester and you take it another one.
Yeah, make sure that you're chipping away at all the things that you have to do little by little, right? So that you're not letting one thing lag behind over the others. Also, it seems like you have, by necessity, to take really long days, right? So maybe try to schedule a nap like Sam suggested. Or, take a really, like a 1 hour lunch and really enjoy it and take that mental break. Not try to multitask while you're having lunch. And I think this is how you learn about yourself, how you best work. So, ask yourself, are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? What's your most productive time during the day? Make a note of it so that when you do have control over your schedule, you know yourself so much that you can schedule things to your advantage so that your most productive time is spent writing or designing experiments, and the more mechanical tasks that you don't necessarily need a lot of brain power or creative force to complete, then maybe you can schedule for your not so productive or creative time. So see this as an opportunity. Yes, I know it kind of sucks, right? And it's tough, but see this as an opportunity to know yourself as a worker, as a professional, as a scientist. And remember, do not let this experience go to waste. Make a note of what your preferences are, where your most productive times during the day are, and review that before setting your schedule for next semester.
I think that's excellent advice. I really agree with that about, looking at where your energy is throughout the day, because it's really individual. I mean, I know people who are like totally night owls, and that's how they best work. So, if you can figure that out for yourself, you'll be so much farther ahead. And I think also, and this is implicit in what Veronica said, but I'm just going to make it explicit, is basically, figure out what your priorities are. What's really important. There are some things that are going to be more important than others. So figure out what those are for you at this career stage and for yourself, and just prioritize those, and try to figure out. There's a lot of stuff that you can do not 100%, and that's okay.
And you know what, too? Think about this. Even in a situation where you're not a student anymore, but you might be a PI or a supervisor, there's always going to be circumstances where you're going to have to schedule things that are not to your preference. That's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. And so this also gives you an opportunity to exercise your self-discipline and your drive, So I think if you're able to walk yourself through the experience, right, cheerlead yourself on, I think that's a skill that's going to be super helpful in the future, many times over.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I'm really glad that Anjali and Nico that you brought up this discussion. I mean, I think it's a little bit like what Veronica was saying. It's trial and error. You guys, as graduate students, are being exposed to responsibilities and experience that you never had the chance to do before as undergrad. So you're gonna have to go through kind of a learning curve, not just in the lab and in classes, but also a learning curve about what works for you, how much time you can dedicate to things, how much is too much, where that idea about monitoring where your energy is also really great. So yeah, it's a great learning experience for everybody.
And just to be clear, just to dovetail off of what Joanna said, we're still learning that. Don't get the idea that we are experts at this. We might have a little bit more experience, but it's something that we've gained experience at, and that we sort of need to keep on top of too, because if not, you can slip really easily. So it's not easy, and we don't have all the answers.
And also too, I think as you grow older, as time goes by, things can change, right? Circumstances, or you might have to adjust the way that you get that balance that you wanted. You know what I mean? So it's always a work in progress. I think it's work-life integration is this breathing thing that you have to nurture and work towards all the time.
Yeah. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? We probably have time for one of those deep questions. Let me see from the list that we had over here. What do you guys do on your free time? Veronica, I know you have some really cool interests. Do you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I think what's consuming most of my free time these days is I just purchased a home. So I've been really enjoying the house, and I've been doing some yard work, and I have little projects around the house. So it's super nice.
Yeah, that's building.
For me, it tends to revolve around family and around exercise. So thankfully for me, exercise is not a struggle, but it's something that I look forward to, and I feel like I need that outlet. So yeah, like I said, weekends we plan family stuff. Sometimes family stuff is just being at home and being quiet. Sometimes it's going out somewhere and doing something fun. And exercise is just a great multitasker right now, where I clear my mind or think about something else and exercise and have time to myself. So yeah, that takes most of my free time these days.
Yeah, I put something in there for that was responding to Marcos. I just wanted to bring it up because, you know, from the perspective that someone was saying that we're still in a learning process and we're not, you know, perfect yet. I do have, you know, I have to recognize that this is one of the areas that I actually have to actively think about and look for ways of putting limits on myself so that I can have appropriate rest and relaxation to do my job effectively, because I do love the job and I'm constantly thinking about it. But when I don't take that time off, my personal life suffers, and that's not pleasant. And you know, I don't have that energy that we've been talking about. That's so important, and it's really important for what I do that I have energy, because you know I have to deal with many different people, and sometimes you know help people go through difficult things, and I have to be in a positive mindset for those. So so for me, you know, it helps to block off time on my calendar for things like going to the gym. You know, and if it's on my calendar, then nobody can say, oh, you know, well, I need a meeting at that time. And yeah, and I decide, you know, that there's certain periods of the day where I'm not gonna do work, and I'm gonna disconnect. And sometimes actually disconnecting electronically is also has become very important for me to kind of stop that work mentality. Yeah. So
Can I say something real quick? Largely because I can't type quickly, but for Marcos, going back to the whole subject, like I think I think there's a lot of space still to be successful in science and technology, while still viewing it as a job. That is, I don't think it has to consume you and be your, your life's passion. I think you can have other priorities outside of work. I just think it tends to be that people who are in academia especially tend to be really passionate about what they do and see it as defining, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I think you can be quite successful having it as a job, and you're just really, really good at that job. So if you're still productive and still interested when you go to work, and it just happens to you that you have other things going on, and family is really important to you, or whatever it is, then that's completely fine. I don't think you have to feel left out, or that's not a possible path. I think as long as you like what you're doing and you're being successful to a level that you want based on your expectations, you can totally take that view. And I think part of it is part of the culture shift that we need to make, and something that we strive for at Ciencia Puerto Rico is to shape sort of, identities that I'm not just a grad student. I'm still whatever it is. I'm still Puerto Rican, or I'm still like a rocker, or I'm still a cyclist, or I'm still like whatever it is you want to be. That is still compatible with your work. So I just wanted to say that because I couldn't type that real quickly.
Yeah, there's, being a scientist doesn't mean giving up some of those other identities. They can be compatible. And that's why sometimes we talk about work-life integration instead of work-life balance, because it's, you can bring your personal self to your work setting, your personal identity to your work setting as well. Cool. So what are the things that you guys do to relax and to kind of fill up your batteries, the energy in your batteries for the next day? So Christina does artwork and dancing. Dancing is super, super good whenever I can manage it.
A gamer, awesome.
Yoga, soccer, yeah.
Yoga, soccer, painting and writing.
Art and hiking and diving.
What sort of diving? Clarify.
Oh.
Scuba diving. Awesome.
I was picturing Simara jumping out of a plane.
Yeah, I also pictured skydiving, or like diving from into a pool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too.
Guitar. It's expensive. What, the skydiving?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, nurture those interests and those times. Nurture time with your friends. Nurture time being silly, being caring for other people. Those are all things that can definitely keep us grounded and keep us going, and make us better scientists.
Yeah, and I think in terms of changing the culture in the labs, I think different departments and different disciplines are really different about how much of your personal self is acceptable to bring. So obviously, if you live in an environment, or you work in an environment where it's all like very buttoned down and everyone's very formal and it's doctor and whatnot, then you want to be a little bit careful about how much you bring, and you might not want to deviate too much from those norms. But I think in a lot of disciplines in academia, people don't really care that much about how you look necessarily, or what stuff. So I think there is some space to bring your own self and and develop that culture in the lab. And I think PIs appreciate that energy that students bring. So, tread lightly, but I think you'll find that there's more space to bring your personal self to work, certainly in academia than many other places.
Yeah, and I think to Christina saying she's learned not to overextend herself and try to please others all the time. I think it's good to be, once you figure out what you can and can't do and how much is too much, you can communicate that to people and people will understand for the most part. Everybody, has to deal with this. In academia, everybody has to balance multiple responsibilities. So I think being clear about what you can commit to and what you can't commit to because of reasonable time limits and responsibilities, it just helps the conversation and makes communication much more clear. All right, guys, is there any last advice you want to give the students?
Truck on, keep trying, and remember that as you're striving to achieve this idea of life, work integration or balance, you might have to develop new habits, and those take some time and effort to develop. So when you're trying something new, a new organization system or a new way of setting priorities or distributing your time, stick to it for a little while and see how you like it. Not just quit after 1 week, because you probably haven't developed the habit after 1 week. And enjoy it. It's a process.
Be true to yourself. Work at it. Seek advice when you need to. Seek support. We all are working at this, and we're here to support you do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. It's already nighttime in California, and Carmencita needs to be picked up, so we're gonna call it a day. But thank you everybody for calling in, and we'll talk to each of you soon.
See ya.
Thank you all. See you.
Bye.